And welcome back to Cajun Coding. This is St. Raz, and we are continuing our Java journey with the Warmup2 section of Nick Parlante's Codingbat site. And we left off with last two. We completed that with the last episode, and we're moving on to an exercise called ArrayCount 9, in which we introduce arrays. An array is a structure in memory consisting of spots in memory that are identified by an index. Array indices are also zero indexed, just as the character slots in a string are. And I didn't actually log in yet here. There we go. Now here we've got public int. Int is going to be what's the return type, return data type. The function is named ArrayCount. And you notice that it's passing in a data type int, and then it's got these empty brackets there, the square brackets. That's going to indicate what it's passing in is the data type array, and the int is indicating that the data type of the elements of the array are integers, and the name, of course, is nums, presumably short for numbers. Given an array of ints, return the number of nines in the array. So what we're going to do is use a for loop, and we'll iterate through the array and check to see how many nines we have there. So first, let's go ahead and set up our counter, count, and initialize that at 0. And now our for loop, which is getting quite familiar. Now if you think maybe I made a mistake here, as it turns out, when you call the length method on an array, you don't have to put the empty parentheses there. And as we iterate through there, we're going to check to see if each value is a 9. So if, nums, and then we're going to put these brackets here. We have to specify the index, and the index is going to be the current value of our I iterator. Now this is an integer, so we can use the mathematic comparator equals, and we're looking for the integer value 9. So if that is indeed the case, then we can increment our counter. And we should be able to return the count that we arrived at based on that. And there we go, everything's correct. We do actually get an error, I believe, if we put parentheses here. Can I find symbol length? Easy enough. And going on to the next one, given an array of ints, return true if one of the first 4 elements in the array is a 9. The array length may be less than 4. So, since we are returning a Boolean, we're just looking for any 9. If we find a 9 in the first 4 spots, we're returning that. So we don't actually have to keep track of a count. So we're going to set up our for loop. And we're looking for what? We're looking for a 9. So if and we'll return true if we find that 9 Now if we don't find a 9 in the array, then the loop completes and we return false. We didn't find one. Now, do we see a problem here? Now, our problem might be that we have an array that's more than 4 elements, and if that is the case, then we're not supposed to go beyond that. So what we can do is, if I is greater than 3, being 0 index 3 would be the 4th spot. If I is greater than 3, then we break out of the loop, and that should do it right there. There's different ways to do that. We could set up an if statement that makes the parameter here, let's say I is less than a length variable, and we could set that, use an if statement to set that length variable as a default to 4, or if num's length is less than 4, change the value to the length of the num's array. And let me see, and I think that is end. There we go, they use the end variable name, and that's exactly what they did right here. Either way is equally correct. And going on to the next exercise. Given an array of ints, return true if the sequence of numbers 1, 2, 3 appears in the array somewhere. So we have our 1, 2, 3 right here, so that returns true. We do not have it in this array, so it returns false. This one does return true. So when we're breaking down the problem, what is it that we're really looking for? We can look for, when we do our for loop, we're looking for I, wherever I happens to be at that point in the loop's iterations. Okay, I equal to 1, I, and then the very next address, I plus 1 equals 2, and then I plus 2 equals 3. So that's how we're going to set that up. Now, because we need to return this if it appears anywhere in the array, we don't have to keep track of how many times it appears. If we find it, we return true. If we don't find it, and the loop completes the entire run through the array, we don't find it, it returns false. So we don't need that count holder or anything. So here we go, we'll write our for loop. It's I equals 0, I is less than num's length. Now, num's length would be fine if we're going through the array one by one in only chunks of 1. So be like -2, because we're grabbing chunks of 3 numbers at a time to look at. And then our incrementer, we increment it by 1 each time. And we see, I think we can just use the return. Actually, that will not work. If we use a return statement here, we grab our first 3, and if that is false, if it's not a sequence 1, 2, 3, then this will return false. So it won't actually check the whole array. It'll just check the first 3. So let's do it this way. We'll use an if statement. So if, let me see, nums I equals 1 and nums I plus 1 is equal to 2 and nums I plus 2 equals that is the case, then we return true. If we iterate through the entire array and we do not find that true at any point in the array, then we return false. And there we go. Now what I was doing before, let me see. I'm almost certain this will not work, but return nums I equals 1 and nums I plus 1 equals 2 and nums I plus 2 equals 3. Now I opine that this will work, I believe, in exactly one case, which is if the array is exactly 3 digits, I think. 3. Well, actually, see, this came through as false, but the thing is, we don't know if it checked any of this. You know, it happens to come back false. It may have been accidentally correct. This shows up the first 3, so it comes up true. Where are our failures? Here it is, 1, 2, 3. That's the sequence we were looking for, and this code says that that is false. But it is correct that it is false in the case of the first 3 elements. So this code only checks the first 3, and it fails otherwise. And we need to return this. See, we don't have our check mark, I don't think. See, we don't have our check mark because this code that we tested last doesn't work. Remember, Control-Shift-Z, and we can. Oh, I think I migrated away from the interface, so I don't think it has those changes in the buffer. So we gotta fix this, and we're gonna set this back. And on to the next problem. And this problem is string match. Given 2 strings, A and B, return the number of positions where they contain the same length 2 substring. So XXCAAZZ and XXBAAZ yields 3, since the substrings XXAA and AZ appear in the same place in both strings. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to iterate basically through both strings there. So this is returning an integer, so we're going to keep count here. So let's go ahead and set up our counter. And our for loop, very familiar format here. So less than, let me see, these are strings. And, okay, these are the same length. Oh, I'm sorry, the strings may or may not be the same length. It doesn't specify. Contain the same length 2 substrings. So let's go ahead and call that int length, or we'll just call it end. Use end. End equals math min, and this takes 2 values, and we're going to use those values a length and b length. And we're familiar with this stuff. We've done this in previous exercises. So we're going to put the end we're going to use that end as the lesser of these two using the math class in min method. Okay. And we'll finish up our for loop here. Oops, what did I do? Here we go. And what are we doing here? We need to look at, actually this is, let's see, end probably should be, we're taking chunks of 2 characters, so let's put -1 on there. And now we need to compare the characters, substrings there. So if a substring I plus 1, we're comparing substrings or strings. We don't use the arithmetic comparator equal equal. We use the equals method. And then we're going to check the same spot in the B string. Same spot would be I plus 1. This closing parentheses closes this, the value for our substring. The next one would close this open parentheses, and then the third one closes our if conditional. And if that resolves to true, then we increment our count. Note, I don't think we've said that before, but we can decrease a value by exactly 1 using 2 minus signs there. It works exactly the same way, but in the reverse direction. But we're going to be incrementing, so. And at the very end of our function here, right before we close the braces, we return our count. That should do it. Looks like we got something wrong here. And now we get to hunt around for the problem. We're not getting any out of bounds errors. Why is this 0? Oh, it's 0 because we're looking for length 2 substrings. So this is length 0, this is length 1, so that would not work. Okay, and I think I see our problem here. We're on a substring. If we're just grabbing one character, we use a value, and then the next value would be that value plus 1. We're grabbing chunks of 2. So here it is, right here. And that should do it. And there it is, all correct. And next exercise, string x. Given a string, return a version where all the x have been removed, except an x at the very start or end should not be removed. So now it says return a string. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the characters from our given string into the string that we're returning, with some conditionals that were outlined in the problem description. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a string for our answer, and we're going to initialize it as empty. And then of course we have to iterate through the original string. So we're going to go ahead and set up our for loop, and we can iterate through this one at a time. So we're going to go ahead and set up a very standard looking for loop. This is not an array, this is a string, so we're going to have the empty parentheses there, and we're grabbing chunks of one character, so this is going to work fine there. And it says return a version where all the x's have been removed. So we're going to copy characters over if the character is not an x. So we're going to copy it over if it's not an x, with the exception that if an x is the very start or the end, it will not be removed. So we're going to use a conditional here. If the very start or the very end, we're going to copy the character, whether it's an x or not. So we're always going to copy that character. So we'll do our conditional, but let's go ahead and put our code block in here, and then we'll do the conditional. If this resolves to true, then we're going to take our answer variable and we're going to use the plus equals to append the character at the index, the current index, according to that for loop. Okay, and just to see that this works, and at the very end we're going to return our answer, of course. Okay, and just to show that this works, what we can do is we can put true here. Okay, now this if statement will always return as true because we're just putting true in the if block there. Okay, and what this does is it's going to always return the string that we got. See, and you notice it's highlighting the incorrect characters there that it doesn't like, but this is just going to return the same string. We can another thing we can do is, because in the compiler's mind, so to speak, true has a value of 1. All other values are false. So, oh, it doesn't like that. See, int cannot be converted to Boolean. That's interesting. Some compilers will assess 1 as being true. And now I'm questioning whether that's true of Java. It may not be true for Java, even though I swore it was. It may be that this IDE doesn't like that, but that's interesting. But you put if true, and it'll always do. But that's not what we're doing. We're going to obey the instructions that have been given us for this. So it's going to return true, and we're going to copy the character that's there if it's at the beginning or the end. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I equals 0, then we're going to copy the character. Or if I equals string length, the very last character would be the length minus 1. Or string if the character is not an X, right? So char at I is not equal to, in the single quotes, remember, X. And that does it. And you'll notice this, because we're starting with index 0, I equals 0. Even if they give us an empty string, it works. Okay. And on to AltPairs. How close are we to being done? We've got a few more. Maybe we won't finish this one up this episode, but it won't be long. AltPairs, given a string, return a string made up of the characters at indices 0, 1, 4, 5, 8, 9, and then the ellipsis indicates this could go on. So kittens yields KIEN. And as with a lot of problems, we first need to figure out what it is that they're asking. What are these? What is this sequence? We've got 0, 1, we've got 4, 5, we've got 8, 9. If you'll notice, what they're doing here is they're taking the first 2 characters and they're adding 4 to each one. 4 is 4 more than 0, 5 is 4 more than 1, and then so on. 8 is 4 more than 4, 9 is 4 more than 5. So we're going to be returning a string, so let's go ahead and set up our answer string, answer variable, and we'll initialize it as 0 again. That certainly calls for a for loop. Are we going to do I++? Or I plus equals 4. This will allow us to increment over 4 spaces instead of the usual 1, because we'll be jumping there. And what are we doing? We're not going to exclude anything based on the value of the characters there. So what we'll be doing is appending to our answer and you may already know what kind of problems we might run into with this. Ooh, simple I. What's line 3? Yeah, I, int. Oh, I didn't declare it as an int. There we go. And we've got some of the tests pass and some of them don't. Here we go. String index out of bounds. Our old friend. And again here. We might need someone to give us a break. So here we go. If I is greater than or equal to string length, break. And this will fix everything, right? Or maybe not. Oh, look at this. I forgot the parentheses. It's still not going to work, though. What are we doing here? What's going on? Well, this substring that we're returning here, or appending rather, to answer, that substring is I, but all the way to I plus 2. So we need this to be a little bit shorter. So maybe if we put a -1, well, we don't get the out of bounds errors, but we didn't get the very last number we should have gotten here either. And then this is an empty case. That's interesting. Let me see. So it didn't write it. Why is that? Well, it's possible, certainly, and you see right here and also right here, it's possible that the very last character we write is on the first one of these pairs. So if we check to see if the second one is out of bounds, we come up with a failed test when the first one is in bounds and the second one's out of bounds, because what we're instructing it to do here is to not write either one of them. So we've got a little more work to do to figure that out. So what we're going to do is, if I is greater than or equal to string length, we're going to go ahead and break, because we do need to break if that's the case. However, if that's not the case, what we're going to do is, if that's not the case, we know we can add this to the answer. And then we're going to check to see if I is less than string, if I is less than string length I plus 1 is less than string length. And that is going to ensure that we don't run over into an out of bounds if we append string substring I plus 1 I plus 2. Now we have out of bounds all over the place. What did I do? 5 plus 1 is less than or equal to? That's not it either. Now what did I do? Okay, so what we've got here, there's our the beginning of our for loop, and then we have if I is greater than or equal to string length, then that would put us out of bounds, so we're going to break. Okay, if that's not the case, if we don't break, then we're going to add the substring I to, I equals 1. That's not right. It's going to be I plus 1. I wonder if that's the cause of all our problems. I plus 1. Now, having done that, if I plus 1 is greater than or equal to string length, then we're going to break. And otherwise we add string substring I plus 1, I plus 2 to answer. Then we return answer, and we've got a missing bracket somewhere. So let's go through this very carefully. I think it's a missing bracket right here. Nope. Okay, and here we go. We're going to go on a hunt for the missing bracket. And this, with more advanced integrated development environments, this is much easier. But we just have to go through each of these. Okay, rather I did a little editing to spare you guys looking through all that stuff, but I did find it. So, and now it works fine there. So a lot of times it's the logic is fine, but then you have to deal with the specific syntax and such. Your instructors or your bosses are going to give you the standards for a particular shop or class as to how you should handle indents and such. And good, more sophisticated integrated development environments will make it clear, more clear than this pretty simple interface here, where blocks of code start and end and such. So that's something you have to deal with there. We're a little past the 30-minute mark. I think we can get through these 4 exercises in the next episode. That should be fine. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, requests, I'd be glad to see those in the comments section. Also, if you have any opinions that you'd like to share or anything like that in the comments section, or questions, you see a question in the comments section that you think that you can answer or have an opinion on, go ahead and speak up. That's a great way for the community to grow and for people to learn. A lot of times the comments can be just as valuable as the content. So thanks for tuning in to Cajun Coding. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time.